Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of Text to Table, Pull Up a Chair. We're about to have a hearty conversation, which we think you'll enjoy. I'm Shawn Boynes, one of the hosts of the show.
Hey, I'm Donté Shannon.
Hey, Michelle Mills Clement.
Hey, I'm Keep That Energy Up, Irving Washington.
How y'all feeling?
Good.
Everybody got their glass?
We're good. We're ready.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into the topic of discussion for today's episode, let's spend a little bit of time talking about the reaction to the first episode. So how do you all feel about what we produced and the reaction to that episode?
Crazy.
Yeah.
I did not expect it to be as big as it was. I think when we said we're going to do this, we didn't know we'd be over 1,000 people liking the page. We didn't know we'd have everybody watching. And I think what happened afterwards is what really threw me off. There was so many people sharing it and talking about it and reaching out. And I'll be honest, I couldn't keep up.
Yeah.
I know there's people I haven't responded to, but I'm so just grateful and thankful that you all took the time.
And I think for me, it was overwhelming in a good way. You know, I think we all received a number of texts from colleagues and friends and family and email messages from people. And I think for me, it struck a chord because we clearly created something that was needed. And it's like one of those experiences where it's the right time, the right people, and the right discussion. So people definitely got something out of it.
Yeah, Shawn, for me, I think the thing that was the most impactful, so the response to everybody's point was, it was just really overwhelming. But just a couple, just speaking of Text to Table, that I got was the one that said, I felt seen from another Black person, not in a leadership role. And then there was another one that came from someone, and they actually said they listened to it more than once because unfortunately they're the only person of color in their organization. They're in a leadership role. They felt lonely. So she said, I just felt like I was listening along with you all like friends and colleagues. And so it felt really good, but then it also felt a little bit of sadness there too, because it's like, it's 2020. Why do people still have to feel like that in 2020?
Yeah. What was most powerful for me out of all of the overwhelmingly positive responses was just the amount of people who were like, I'm sharing this with my staff, or I'm sharing this with my CEO colleagues. There was a young lady who commented on one of our posts, and she said, I have a network of 7,000, CEO executives or executives of associations. And she was like, I'm sending this video to them. And I was just like, wow, way to have an impact. So congratulations, you guys.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And just let's, talk a little bit about what we see happening next with this and where we want to go with it, because I think, we have this unique opportunity and people are listening, which is what we wanted, but what's next for us?
We have a mission, right?
We're working on that. Yes.
Well, here's what I think is hilarious is that we're obviously all in leadership roles, and we've done strategic plans and planning. We went into this the complete model of fail fast. It's not even fail fast. We weren't even trying. We were just sharing our experiences.
Yeah.
And then I think the top question people were asking us was like, because people were so energized, what's next? What's happening? And it was overwhelming to us, and we're in all these leadership roles, and we're like, well, we don't know.
Yeah.
But we did have a conversation though. We did talk about that a little bit. And feel free to build upon this, but one of the things we realize is that there's a community of people who are passionate around making things better, around anti-racism, around stopping discrimination, around not having these sort of isolated experiences, or people feeling isolated in workplaces. And, we want to just channel that energy and build a community around people who are passionate about that.
Yeah. And it's about leadership and race. It's about leadership and race. And I think one of the things that struck me, you know, as I processed through that first episode and all the responses that we received from people, I realized, you know, we touched a little bit on, and Michelle, this was, you know, your, you know, example early on in that first episode about feeling responsibility to say something and have a conversation with your staff team. And I realized empathy is a critical leadership competency that people have to find a way to embrace. You can't ignore that anymore. I think there are lots of leadership competencies that people embrace and demonstrate good leadership by embracing them. But empathy is at the top of the list for me now. You have to have that. And if you don't, yeah, I think you need to work on it.
All I was going to add is that I think this created a safe space, which I think we started making it a safe space for us, but it turned into a safe space for so many people to listen alone and go along with the conversation, to share it and use it as a conversation starter with people who may not have wanted to talk about this. And it's really grown into something bigger. And I think that's why it's turned into something important that we are choosing to continue. We're choosing to keep pushing and challenging challenging ourselves really, and what else we can bring to the table, because it is important. And we finally have an opportunity where people are listening to what it feels like to be Black in America, to be Black in leadership. And I think, you know, we have a responsibility to make sure people understand that.
Yeah. And I'll just, you know, I'll note this before we jump into the meat of our discussion. We are not diversity, equity, and inclusion experts, nor are we experts in anti-racism. We are experts in living our Black lives. So that's what we're bringing to you. And we are sharing our personal experiences. So listen and try to take that in. You know, we can't provide you with direct guidance and come up with a roadmap for you related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in your organization, or help you address anti-racism in your personal life. That's not, you know, we don't have the capacity to do that. So, you know, thank you for tuning in, and we're going to jump into the meat of our discussion. And the topic for today's episode is assimilation and code switching.
What?
Switch it up, switch it up.
Yes.
About to start with that.
Well, I guess I'll jump in, and because I want to know what you all define code switching. So tell me what you feel like code switching is.
Can I give you literally, speaking of the last episode, this really happened. I thought so. I realized I was so relaxed and comfortable with the three of you. In the recording of the episode. When I watched back, I was like, oh wow, I got really comfortable. For example, I think I said like we was, or I just used just different, you know, there's different subject verb agreement, like very community driven type things where I realized, oh, I got completely relaxed in that moment. And I think that is a version of code switching where in another context or another conversation, like if this was a traditional, you know, non-drinking daytime panel, I would have been much more cognizant of all the words that were coming out of my mouth and who I represent and what that means. But because even though I knew in the back of my head this was going to be shared publicly, I was just so comfortable talking to you all that there were just certain things, like even to keep the energy up, I had a little, you know, I had to put a little this into it. And I realized, to me, that's like a version of code switching.
Yeah. And you kept it real.
Say the least.
Yeah.
I think code switching for me is my voice, how it sounds, to your point, Irving, what comes out my mouth. And it's a topic people talk about now, but I feel like I do it so much, I'm cognizant of it now, but before I wouldn't even realize I was doing it. It was so fluid. It would just boom, 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 and hit. And then I think before I came into the role I'm in now, I remember being aware of it and how my voice changed when I was talking to a board member. But this board has so many people of color on it, which I've never experienced ever. I'm usually the only one, that I slipped into that comfort state. And I realized that it's not that I can be myself or I wasn't being myself. I was being a version of myself, I think, a survival version of myself in some of these arenas where we have to be. But I've found that that comfort level you just talked about, Irving, I am very fortunate that I have that at this association. You know what I mean? And it comes out, and I can have these kind of dialogues with, you know, board members, and they can be at my 40th birthday party and we're comfortable. And so I think that's why diversity matters.
Yeah.
You know, that's why it's important to have everyone around the table so everyone can be themselves and be comfortable being yourself.
Yep. And I think for most Black professionals, we learn it early on. It's part of, you know, I refer to it as learning how to navigate the matrix, because it's complicated and you have to realize when to turn it on, how to use it. And, you know, I'll admit this, and I'm not proud to admit it, but I totally assimilated, and that contributed to my success. And one of the responsibilities that I assumed for myself, not that anyone told me that I had to do it, but I think for many Black people, we tend to be the only ones, whether it's in the room, in our workplaces, you know, in social settings outside of the office, but it's related to work, it's professional. Sometimes you're the first one. So for me, it's been, if I'm the first one or if I'm the only one, make sure I'm not the last one. So how can I pass on what I've learned about being in those spaces to help the next Black person so that they have an easier time of it? Because trust me, like I went to Howard, I went to an HBCU, historically Black college, for those who may not be familiar. And, you know, coming out of that environment, and it was in the 90s, I had a public enemy, fight the power spirit. Like that's how I was coming into the workforce. And then you hit that brick wall and you're like, ooh, I need to pull this back a bit. And you start seeing how other people ascend in their careers by being a certain way, speaking a certain way. And for Black people, we learn it very early on. So it's, you know, it can be stressful. And Michelle, to your point, you know, it's like the fact that you have that, you know, wonderful culture in your organization where you can just relax and be yourself and still be, you know, the awesome CEO that you are without having to code switch, just removes something else from the equation that we all have to struggle with.
Yeah, for me, code switching, I think Michelle said a key word there, and I want to reference with Irving as well, is survival. So that's what code switching to me means, right? Is, as you said, Shawn, navigating a professional workforce that is framed in a white construct, right? So a white framework, and knowing how to take advantage of opportunities, you know, get jobs, get promotions, you know, become successful. You learn how to survive or code switch. And Irving, to what you were saying earlier, I think the reason you felt comfortable with us is because there was no survival, you know, instinct that had to kick in with us, right? Because you're not competing with us or anything, or you don't have like, there's no leverage that needs to be had with the four of us. It's just us, you know, just kind of talking as four Black people. So, you know, for me, it's really about survival. And Shawn, you know, don't be ashamed to admit, you know, that you've done that. I think that's what we've been conditioned to do since we have been born Black in this country. You know, we've learned. I all my primary education was majority white. You know, going to majority white schools, and I remember my parents telling me like, "You're not going in that school dressed like this, or when you get there, you better act like you got some sense." You know what I mean? And those things meant like, don't embarrass me to the white people. You know.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if you want to be successful, here's how you need to act, be, socialize, engage with your white counterparts. And so you pick those things up early, even not learning them, just, you know, societal, social cues, excuse me, I can't talk, will teach us like, here's what you need to do to survive and be Black and successful in America. You got to code switch.
Yeah, and I think that assimilation also, you know, there's that part, but then it's also how we show up, how we present ourselves, what do we look like? And Michelle, you know, specifically for you, I want you to talk a little bit about, you know, as a Black woman, I think there are, oh my gosh, so many challenges that you all have to face in the workplace, from hair. Can you be natural? Can you wear braids and that sort of thing? And you know, how does that play into what some view as professional or not under that, you know, the white construct that Donté talked about, and how many of us have to fit into that?
Yeah, so I've pretty much always worn my hair straight. Just has been a preference. It's how I grew up. It could be constructed in code switching or assimilating rather, but it's just been how I've always worn it. In the last decade or so or more, Black women are wearing their hair natural. They'd come, you know, with curlier hair in their natural state. And I remember having a colleague say to me, like, oh, I wish she'd wear her hair like yours. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Referencing a coworker whose hair, she came and she did like a wash and go. It was cute. But it's almost like they wanted it more tame. And I remember being acutely aware, you know what I mean, that I look safe. You know what I mean? Like I'm a safe looking Black woman. And to some people, and my last association being 90% all white men, I don't not take that for granted. You know what I mean? I don't not take that. I didn't come in, you know, with my hair in a natural state. It's natural, it's just straight. But I straightened it, and it wasn't something that they had to contend with, I guess. And so when we have the stay-at-home order and the pandemic and the salons, now I go get my hair done like every 2 weeks. And so when the salons weren't about to be open, I was like, okay, I know how to do my own hair. It'll be cool. Then after a while, I'm like, no, you know, this natural hair, straighten it, I'm straight. And I said, I'm gonna get some braids. I've wanted some. Like I haven't had braids since college. And I said, I've wanted to have some. Like it's everybody's wearing them. All the Real Housewives of Atlanta got them. And I said, I want to wear it. I want to get my high bun and everything going. But I remember being so self-conscious of what the members were gonna think, and what, you know, maybe board members were gonna think, and what people were gonna say. And, you know, I was nervous to go on my first Zoom call with my braids on. Like I think I was speaking at something, and I'm like, I don't know how this is gonna go. But I got a lot of positive feedback. But what was interesting is I had a lot of Black women reach out to me that said, "Oh my God, when I saw you with braids, I was like, I can go get braids now. Like Michelle's got braids, and she's CEO of one of the largest realtor groups. I can get braids for sure now." And more people are feeling like I can go get them. I did have some comments once I took them out. Oh, I like your hair a lot better like that. You know what I mean? And so, you know, you kind of, you know what that's about.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I'll probably get them again because they were so easy. But we shared like a staff meeting. I think we did an exercise where everybody just shared a picture of like what brings them joy at the moment. And I posted a picture of me like posing with my braids. And I said, this is bringing me joy because I can work out freely, you know, not worried about my hair, but I feel so in touch with myself as a Black woman with this hair like this. And, you know, I'll do it again. And so I look forward to getting them again. I'm sure there'll be some side eyes, but overall, it was a freeing process for me. And I know it seems so small to most people, but it was really a freeing place to be a CEO and getting braids, and the fact that it even had to be a thing. But,
Yep.
you know, they were hot too. I mean, I rocked them for sure.
They did.
Guys, what do you think about, you know, maybe not necessarily the hair, certainly for me and Donté, because, you know, we don't have that problem other than maybe
Oh, but I got a little bit more hair.
shiny head. Yeah. Yeah. But it could be the dress, you know what I mean? Like, you know, what do you have that, you know, executive presence? We've heard that before, right?
Yeah, you know, the when we were texting about this, like one thing people may not be familiar with, and we can drop a link, is Harvard Business Review. They did a whole series on advancing Black leaders, and there's a whole section devoted to code switching. And then just to kind of level set, I think, because you know, we were actually in a conversation not too long ago, and we mentioned this word, and I think we saw a reaction from someone not in the Black community or person of color, where they had a pause of like, what is that? Can you repeat that? And so they're broadly defined as like adjusting one style of speech, appearance, behavior, and expression in ways that will optimize the comfort of others in exchange for fair treatment, quality, service, and employment opportunities, which I think we can agree that is, and when we were texting about this, one of the things I was reflecting on is that in here, it also talks about a couple of things in here that I think are unique for people to realize is that expressing shared interest with people of the dominant groups actually advances your own personal promotion, right? And how much of that we have to do. So to your point of like executive presence, I really had a trouble just thinking of personal experiences where I can actively recall doing it, because it just felt so normal to adjust to the dominant group of like, this is what you have to do to get ahead. And I think for me, the closest thing I can relate to, which I know a lot of people from people of color can relate to this, I'm more of an introverted person. So already I'm not like super social unless I know you closely. But where I see us being left out, particularly early in the career, because this was my case, I didn't want to go to the like bars or like the after hour hangouts or like all this like stuff. And it wasn't because I didn't like the people that I was with like early in my career. Like I liked those people, but it was, you know, it was exhausting sometimes. Like I didn't have the connections of, you know, what's that show? Like one of them UPN shows or something people would talk about, you know, like these things, One Tree Hill or, so, you know, some of these things, like I got into Friends later. And it was such common language that it was just, you know, sometimes it was exhausting. And being younger, I didn't realize that's also where the networking happens and the relationship building happens that go beyond the scope of your job.
Yep. Yep.
Here's what I'm going to call, I'm going to be honest about I'm going to call this white accommodationist trauma. And for me, so I don't have a problem wearing a suit. I look very nice in suits. But what I think about is if I have to go to a meeting, I immediately think, okay, how many white men are going to be in the room? And if I want to wear like a nice suit with maybe has some designs in it or like, you know, a different type of flair to it, I'm like, nope, you either need to do a blue suit or a black suit.
Tone it down.
Tie or black tie, you know, keep it simple. And so I think about those things because the framework, you know, I know for a lot of those guys in the room around professionalism, and sure enough, when we get in that room, we all have on the same thing, you know, it's the framework of professionalism that, you know, this is the attire that you need to be wearing, and this is what's considered professional. So for me, you know, that's where my trauma kind of comes in, and I'm like, okay, you know, I got to switch over, you know, I can't wear this nice double-breasted, you know, nice suit with the gold trim in it. You know, I gotta save that for church or something, you know, I gotta save that for, you know, a family outing. But for me, that's where I really kind of recognize, you know, the need to turn it on and turn it off.
You know what I call that?
What's that?
Get in how you fit in. And we know that there are lots of Black people who don't necessarily look like they fit in, and they have a harder time getting into some of these inner circles or getting into organizations, you know, as employees. And that's part of the whole assimilation thing, and you know, code switching, and it's stressful, it's hectic, and it's what we've had to do. I'm hoping that will change. You know, I think back to, you know, many instances being the only one in the room, and y'all may have experienced this as well, but you see another Black person and you get excited and you're like, oh, I need to go talk to them, whether you know them or not. And I've heard, you know, people have said to me, oh, well, y'all shouldn't talk to each other. You should work the room. You need to meet people that you don't know. And that is like a gut punch. Like, do you know how insulting that is? Like, you only have 2 or 3 Black people in a room and you're saying we can't talk to each other. Like, there's not enough. So when we see each other, we get excited and we gravitate to each other. We want to go and hug. And if we do know each other, we want to catch up. We may not talk to each other often enough where it's like, when we see each other, it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in months. But to be told, you need to go work the room and talk to other people and not gravitate to each other. So that's kind of been, now it's a pet peeve for me.
I got to comment on that. Me and Irving were at a conference. In case you didn't know, we were on like a world tour last year.
Yeah.
Some award we won, I don't know, one of them. Yeah. And we were at a conference and we had not seen each other in, I don't know how long. It was a long time. And so we both got to the conference at like the breakfast or something. And of course, you know, we sat by each other and we were catching up, and immediately someone came over and was like, you know, you two split up, you know, go meet other people. And I knew half the people there, you know what I mean? Like we both did, actually. We knew most of the people that were there. And it's not that we didn't speak to them. We were just catching up the same way. The two white professionals were sitting there catching up the same way. The two men and the two women were sitting there catching up. And no one was telling them like, go get up. And it didn't just happen at breakfast. I mean, we're at like the session and people are getting up telling us, y'all need to move, you know what I'm saying? Or switch seats, or, oh, you know, you should go. And it's not like they're taking us to go meet somebody. Right. It's not like they're taking us to say, hey, let me go introduce you to the chair of this conference or this and this. It's just don't sit with each other. But I'm looking at you sit with your crew, you know what I mean? And kikiing, and it's cool. Yeah. You know, but we can't sit. And we were legitimately catching up, you know what I mean? And talking about the conference, actually, like, what sessions are you going to go to? Maybe we can divide and conquer actual good content that you should do when you're going to a conference. But because, and I think were we like the only two Black people there? There might have been maybe.
No, there were more. Yeah, there were more.
4?
No, there were more. There were more overall, but
4 more?
For whatever reason we were.
I think Michelle's point, Irving, is there weren't enough.
There weren't enough. But it was definitely noticeable every time we were by each other. And then I think at one point we were like, you know what, screw that. Like it's until y'all split up, we're not splitting up.
Wait, you reminded me of an experience. So this has happened at a couple of conferences now in my line of work, because we tend to go to a lot of conferences. And I never really connected this to code switching per se, but even when conferences are getting more diverse, or events getting more diverse, it's still a rarity for like Black people to congregate in a majority kind of white spaces together. Mm-hmm. So, and there's so many instances now that are coming to my mind. Like when we do congregate, we're like, oh, wait a minute, too many Black people in a corner together. We about to, you know. And then one particular moment I recall, there were about maybe 8 or 9 Black men, which in my space on the journalism side, that is just like, you just don't see that. And so we were like, oh, it's like space-time continuum is about to mess up because you have all these Black people. And another thing that we typically talk about is that when we do congregate, we also are like, for most places, there's a photographer that's not too far away from us, because we're like, oh, we about to be on the brochure. we about to get up.
Yeah, Irving, remember?
This is the brochure. Have you drink?
Yeah.
Me and Irving staged an ad because, again, part of our world tour, they were following us and we were sitting with each other, but we were at a diverse table. And we're like, up here comes the photographer, go. We were both like, and they actually used it. It's an ad.
I love it.
I actually was on, I won't say what association, it's another real estate association. I was the only picture on their homepage for like 5 years. Mm-hmm. And I remember being one of 3 Black people at that whole conference outside of the keynote, who was my soror, which is the only reason I was there. Yeah. And they got the picture and they took this picture, which I was cool, you know, put me on the website. I love it. Mm-hmm. But it was definitely, to me, I actually told them today, because they're doing a session about just, you know, everything that's going on. And they asked, like, what do you want to share with us? I said, oh, what I want to share is that I've been on your website and your homepage for 5 years, and I've never really felt welcome in your association.
Boom.
Talk about tokenism.
So put me up there. I'm cool, but don't be wrong. You know, I'll be on the front page. Yeah. ASE, don't take me off the web page. I feel welcome.
Yeah. Wait, can I add something to here though? It's one thing that I also thought was interesting about this Harvard Business Review article was it made a point that even when there are more than, you know, not just being the only, even when we're in a collective mass, we still code switch. Like it's even amongst each other, we check each other on code switching as like that's the norm. And I'm just curious, like, what do y'all think about that? Is that true? Do you feel like that's true, or experiences?
Yeah.
I think it's true. I mean, to my point, you know, when you are the first one or the only one, you learn the system. So you then pass that on to those that you hope will follow you. And I know I've done it. I'd be like, look, don't do this, or let me, have a conversation with you before you enter into whatever that space may be. Or if you're about to interview for a CEO gig, to give them, here are some things that worked for me. Here's what didn't work for me, so that I don't want people to step on the same landmines that I did. I try to provide them with guidance so that, I learned, let me pass that on to someone else, some other Black person that's going to benefit from that. So yeah, I think you're right.
I also think, Irving, you talked about people not wanting to congregate like at a conference. I've been in this role for 2 years, and I remember there's still not a ton of us that run associations at the local level, but I remember there was a lot of walking past each other in the hallway sometimes, or just being like, I don't want to, talk too much. And there was another CEO that basically would pull us all together and say, we're going to all, talk, catch up, be in the open. We don't have to hide. We
I
don't
love
have
that.
to hide. We can be here. And it was so freeing, to have that space. But as we reflect, there's people that have been in this organization for decades and still don't know everybody that looks like them. And so I think not that the organization didn't allow that or would frown on it. I think it's a personal internal conflict. You know what I mean? Of that, I don't want to be seen in the group of all Black people because that may make others uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And they may think, what are you doing? What are you talking about? And we always joke like, it's a caucus meeting. Can you get out? And, we joke and it's always fun. I had a past president who told me, he was a white male. He told me that he's a guest or he's honorary member. He'll take some notes or whatever, and it's all good and it's fun. And we laugh about it. But there are definitely times I can think back in my career, and not even just my career, I think just my life, of when you've wanted to avoid being seen in the group of Black people or being too engulfed in it, at least in my experience. I don't know if you all have had that too or not.
Yeah, for me, I again automatically default to survival. So if I'm in a group of Black people and I'm going to code switch and be as professional as I can until somebody says something that kind of breaks the ice, or like I realize like, oh, okay, I can be cool with these people. Like, if they mention a TV show or if they mention, something that happened and they give their opinion on it and I happen to agree with it, then I'm like, oh, okay, I can relax. There's no survival needed here. But I definitely have been in circles, where I feel like, I got to keep my professionalism up. There's a survival piece here that I got to make sure I maintain, because this person might say something to that person, or, I need to be able to connect with this person professionally because I want to do this opportunity or that opportunity. So I've definitely felt that in my own Black circles, especially.
Well, what do y'all think the difference is between, like, this is what I get not confused about, but I'm like thinking if I heard this, not being Black or not being a person of color, like we all act different professionally than what we do at home. So like, why is this different than, I could have a Southern accent, or, I mean, obviously code switching got its basis from like language origins, but like, yeah, just how is this different? Why is it different from, we all act differently around our professional colleagues, which I don't know if I have an answer to that.
Again, I think it's survival. I think we don't have to survive, or we don't have to, there's nothing threatening when you are at home or when you are like in a comfortable environment with people
Yeah.
and folks but as soon as you have to step into any type of professional environment, there's the potential threat there. There's, potential survival that kicks in just naturally, I think, that you don't have when you aren't with folks that you can be relaxed with.
I just say, I don't know if it's always just professional. I think of like, we even talk about like when people get pulled over, you get pulled over by the police, just making sure you're so proper and perfect grammar and everything, and it's really polished. However, that's perceived in restaurants where, maybe you're the only one, or you're not supposed to be in there. looking for a house, talking to people, you know what I mean, and wanting to present yourself a certain way. Like, I don't think it's just professionally. And that's where I go back to how fluid it happens. You know what I mean? Just, I find it just occurs so often and you don't even realize it. And I'd be curious to see what you all think, but I definitely have had moments when I've been like, which one is real? You know what I mean? Like, is this me? Is this me? Is this really me? Is this when I'm like with my sorors, my Theta East sorors, that is probably the most relaxed and silly and everything that I am. But I'm like, is that real me? Or when I'm like at home with my family and playing and having a good time with Royce or chilling with Brace and we're laughing at Martin, I'm like, is that real me? Or when, you know, I'm hanging out with board members that are cool that I get along with well, which is all of them. I'm like, is that real me? So it's really one of these things where I've for me, it's been recent, like as I'm noticing it. And to your point, Irvin, is it just, you just act different in different environments? Or is it really code switching or what, you know, what is it? And, you know, maybe I got to take this to the therapist, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's not just at work. You know what I mean? And I think the survival piece for sure. Get pulled up by a cop, you know, I'm a Harvard graduate at that point. But any environment, any place we go, and we tend to vacation places where we know they probably don't want us there. That's kind of our thing. We go places where they don't expect to see us. And we've seen the blatant racism when we've done it, but we're definitely careful about how we're presenting ourselves.
You know what it actually reminds me of? There was Donté, when was this? This was about a week or so ago. There's a group of about 16 Black CEOs that we've convened, you know, here in the DC metro area. We probably need to expand that outside of the DC metro area because there are more, including Michelle, of course. We love to have you in the group.
Icon
And
CEOs call me. Well,
and we were having a conversation, and you know, I have to give credit to Dr. Arthur Evans, who's the CEO of the American Psychological Association. He made a very poignant statement, and he said that we are fighting two pandemics in this country. There is the coronavirus pandemic, and then there's the racist pandemic that's happening. And he said, you know, for the coronavirus pandemic, healthcare workers have to put their PPE on, their personal protective equipment. And he said, for the racist pandemic, Black people, we have to put our PPE on. That's our armor. We armor up. So everything that you just talked about, Michelle, you know, how we have to show up in public. And I think about, you know, when I was going into an office, you know, I would mentally get myself ready. I would dress appropriately. I would, you know, prepare myself for stepping into the world outside of my home because we have got to be in our PPE in order to just survive. And it's stressful and it's hectic. So put those two things together, and we're Black people, we're dealing with a lot. So yeah, it's you know, there's this pandemic that's happening, but it's more than just the coronavirus pandemic. It's this racist pandemic that is impacting Black people, and not just, you know, if you think about from the healthcare perspective too, you know, the rates of infection for Black people, it's higher, and you know, that's a whole nother conversation for a different show. But yeah, it's the PPE for us.
And Michelle, your point resonate, like when you were talking, like it just resonated so much because particularly as I have gotten older and my both personal and professional set of friends and colleagues is more diverse, that like, who are you really? And also just growing up knowing that you were in a system where you had to do this, that conflict really resonates with me. And one example, I've also worked for a couple of Black organizations, Black mission-based organizations, which therefore lend itself to majority Black people in the organization. And one moment always sticks out of my mind, and it's just a super small moment, but it's like a fond memory for me, is that we had produced this huge conference, convention, like over 3,000 people, crazy. You know, many of us can relate to that in this conversation. But at the end of it, when we were packing up packing up the conference and doing all the mailings, the wobble came on, and we all did the wobble.
Not the wobble.
And that was and it was like nobody said nothing. Like two people started doing over here. You know, we're all like working. It literally could have been like a little music video because like two people started it and then we stop and then we do it. And it's just such like a cherished moment for me that could have only happened in a Black organization, right? Like not that, you know, even where I'm at now in the places I work, could we do the wobble? Of course we could do the wobble. We can drop a link in there for y'all that don't know what the wobble is. But
oh Lord.
You can do it, but it was just this organic thing that happened differently in that space. And it's one of those things where it's just like, you know, I can start the wobble at my current job now and it'll be fine. But again, it wouldn't be that same sort of moment.
Yeah. I think one of the important things that as people who are watching, who are still trying to understand, you know, what we're talking about when we mention code switching is that, you know, I think it was mentioned earlier, I think either Irving or Michelle said it, like, this is one of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because the framework we, again, know professionalism as is in a white framework and is in a white construct. But when you think about people who are from other countries, other cultures, they have, you know, different versions of what professionalism is. You know, someone may have on full African garb and in their country or their culture, like they are professional, you know what I mean? And they are buttoned up and they are like fly, you know, they are ready for an interview, you know, or for an executive role in their African garb. But if they show up like that to an American corporation in white America, they're going to be like, what you got on? Like, no, you know, like that's not appropriate. So I think, you know, in understanding what we mean when we say code switching, it's those types of things where, you know, we have to conform or accommodate to survive in white corporate America and its standards of fashion and beauty and professionalism, quote unquote.
You're right. Well, let's move on to our next topic, which is actually another podcast that I discovered, and I shared it with you all, and I want us to chat about it a little bit. But it is the On Being podcast. And recently they featured Robin DiAngelo, and she's the author of White Fragility. So she is, you know, hot right now because she's everywhere and she's talking about her book and she's trying to help white people deal with what's happening now in this country. And then there's another gentleman, Reza Menakem, who is also, you know, someone that speaks from a place of Black trauma. And I'm curious to know what you all thought about the podcast when you listened to it, especially in relation to what we've been talking about in our first episode and what we're talking about today.
Podcast was fire.
It was really good.
It was awesome. I think for me, there were so many things that rang true again, just from them talking about, you know, how being in this country, being raised in this country, born in this country, as a white person, you almost are not exempt from racism at all, because again, it is what is learned from childhood on, from education to social cues to the social constructs that are built in this country. You learn racism. You learn that, you know, from the beginning, your race makes you better than other races in this country. There's things in this country, indoctrinated in the system of this country, that just inherently teach you that. And so what I appreciated about the podcast is also the awareness that was talked about around that. And even Robin just saying, like, I know for myself, like, there are investments that I've made into, you know, the system of the racist system of this country that I benefit from, you know, and she didn't do that consciously, you know, or intentionally. It's just how she's been operating through life and what's been presented to her as a white woman in this country. So I just appreciated her realness, you know, and understanding her own consciousness around white supremacy and racism.
Yeah, to that point, and this should be T2T homework, so people should be talking about what their experiences to the podcast were. But I just thought Robin kicked it off really well with the sense of the example she gave about growing up poor and white. And then, yeah, the story she told about her mother, you know, they were hungry, obviously, and her mother wouldn't allow her to take food, you know, that they didn't know who it came from. And the comment of it could have been from a colored person. And when she, and I never really thought about this before, but she said, just because I was poor doesn't mean I didn't suffer different things. I just learned racism from a different class position. And when she said, I said,
Exactly. Yeah.
Again, it is just a different class position. Like there's still an element of power that comes to that. And I thought that's like within the first 2 minutes. And I'm like, oh, this is about to be a good podcast, right? Like just that level of how you still have power, how you can have power and oppression together.
Mm-hmm.
What I saw or heard, I think it was Resma who said it. This is the first time I've heard white supremacy described as a philosophy and creating racism as a philosophy, and saying that it's a philosophy because it can mutate, it can adapt.
Yes.
It mutates and it adapts. Generation after generation, decade after decade, year after year. And that was so powerful to hear. I never thought about it like that. And just saying how white supremacy shows up will mutate and always adapt, and how the responsibility is to want to break that down. And I think he pointed out that there's devout racist and complicit racist.
Mm-hmm.
So either you flat out, you just are racist, and then complicit racist where you ignore it and you let it slide and you don't say anything, and you let it continue to mutate and adapt. And until people, white people, want to stop letting it mutate and adapt and continue, white supremacy as a philosophy and racism as a philosophy will continue on. And that stayed with me. I listened to it over the weekend. That's stayed with me, and it still gives me chills right now. I'm hearing that.
So Shawn texted this, and when I thought of you, Shawn, was when Resma was like, "White folks got work to do amongst themselves."
I did too.
Hey,
I did too.
Hey. And I don't know Reza. So we hear. But what I will say is, just kind of putting it in context with Text to Table, we're going to share these resources through our community. And if you're not signed up for it, we definitely encourage you to sign up for it. We're not trying to give you the answers. We want you to do the work, and we want you to think about a lot of this stuff and make time to be introspective and really do the work. And for me, one of the things that I took from that podcast, because there was a lot to unpack in that podcast, because it was just packed with so much good stuff. You got to start somewhere. If you think you're good, work to be great. If you think you're great, and that's saying a lot in this space, then be excellent. And if you think you're like on the other end of that spectrum and you are not doing so good, then figure out how you can get to good. And that's going to be different for every person, and it's going to take time and it's going to take work. And that's kind of what he was, talking about, which is put the work in, and I cannot, carry your emotions. I got my own to deal with. And in some respects, this is my perspective and my opinion, it's emotional hijacking. When white people bring stuff to Black people, and if they're emotional or if they're feeling guilty and they dump that on us, I don't know what to do with that. Like, what do you want me to do with that? That is emotional hijacking for me. So I tend to stay away from that as much as I possibly can.
Shawn, I think where I understand.
Sorry,
say that again, Michelle.
That's that Team Shawn, Team Michelle.
And I was Team Michelle. And then when I heard that podcast, I more understood Shawn's perspective as well, from like, no, don't come to me about how to resolve this, because what Resma also said in the podcast is that, this is for something white people need to work out amongst themselves. But also, as you work it out among yourselves, you have to be raw and expose yourself to each other and hold each other accountable, and saying, you know what, I have this belief, or I did this last week and I need to talk about it. That's how raw I think white people, or as Reza suggested, white people have to get with each other in order to start doing something about this. And then the other piece too that I think was important is that this isn't something to do as a trend, right? Or this isn't something that is, you know, you want to get together and conquer the world and you have a strategy and you got an 8-point presentation about how this is going to be resolved by next year. This is like years and years of work and conversations and exposing yourselves and being vulnerable with each other around how you are either complicit, you know, or explicit in your racism, or trying to dismantle it, you know, be actively trying to dismantle it. So I thought those were very two powerful points that made me better understand your perspective, Shawn, of like, you know, don't come to me about about how to resolve it. I was just like, oh wow, you know what, that is right. You know, it's not gonna, white people have to do this on their own, and they got to be real and raw with each other about their own
And
life.
unlearn some things, you know, because a
And
lot of
unlearn
that
something.
stuff is learned somewhere along their life journey, and it's unlearning that. And we all know what it's like to have to unlearn something. It's not easy.
Yeah.
And what really resonated for me, and you know, I think they just captured a lot what we talked about in the last episode, just in a more sort of academic way and a conversational way, was for people, you know, white people or people in power, realizing the investment that you have from the system not changing. Like when Robin said, if you start from the place of, I am already racist, I'm in a system of racism, therefore I've likely done. And also when she said, and I think we've even referenced sometime, like racism is not like this binary state. You can have moments of being anti-racist and racist. Like these all can exist. Like these are moments in time. So even saying you're an anti-racist or I'm not, like it's actually not a real thing, because you can go through these different moments. But when she was saying that, you know, people are invested in not seeing, because one of the things that I've been conflicted about in the Team Shawn, Team Michelle debate is I bounce between both of those, and I typically don't, if I'm presenting a problem, I like to come up with a solution to it. Like that's just like, regardless of this conversation, that's how I operate. So part of me has been like, okay, well, we're throwing all this stuff out. Like, well, what's the solution? And then that podcast really level sets it to say, listen, there's an allure of constantly asking, what can I do, right? And there's an allure to putting the onus on people of color to figure it out because it's so complex. And there's an investment that people have to accept, that as long as we don't solve this problem, you benefit from all of the power structures that currently exist. And I just thought that whole thing was like, I didn't think about it in that context before.
Another great resource that explains that very blatantly, Irving, and I think this is another resource to share, is there's a documentary on Amazon Prime called The Uncomfortable Truth. And it's basically a white man whose family used to own slaves. He kind of goes back to that history and talks about, you know, how the system has been set up, you know, since slaves were brought over, to really, again, benefit, you know, white advancement in this country. And it's like, I learned a lot of new things watching that documentary. So,
Called?
what did you say, Michelle?
What's it called?
The Uncomfortable Truth.
All right, that one. Text it to me.
All right. We put it on the table and we text it now.
Yeah.
But you know what this conversation made me think of, and going back to the, like, tying in the code switch conversation, is that, because I'm also thinking of like, if you know code switching existing from a leadership perspective, like what do you do? And I think anybody that's in a position of power, no matter what your race, gender, background is, recognizing that power and how are you making people feel comfortable, included, that inclusive nature, right? Versus just completely ignoring that it existed. So like, if you didn't know about code switching before this conversation, like what would you do now to make people feel included on your team that may not do that, versus the complicitness of just saying, oh, I didn't realize this was a thing?
I think don't go up to someone and be like, are you code switching right now? Please don't do that. Don't do that.
Wait, did y'all say
one? That's tip number one.
Yeah, the Obama code switch.
Oh yeah.
Handshake and then
and then he'll do the tap.
That's a great example, though.
Yeah.
It totally is. Yeah.
I think in case people are thinking about this phenomenon and want to go out and figure out, what do I do about it? I don't think it's anything you need to go do about it or fix. I think it's similar to how I started off my story around this and being on a board now where I'm fluidly not code switching because I don't have to because I'm comfortable. I think that is the answer. Make sure that your organization, whether that's your board, your staff, your friend circle, whatever it is reflective of multiple races, genders. I always stick with like races, and create a space where everyone can feel comfortable and everyone can be themselves. And then you don't have to worry about that. And I think I didn't realize how uncomfortable I was at my last place until I realized how relaxed I am here and how much support I have here. And even when I deal with unconscious bias and microaggressions and racism and prejudice from maybe members, or I get comments about why am I taking pictures with other Black people, it doesn't hurt me because I have support. I have other people that I report to at the board level. I have team members on the staff team that can reflect and relate, and it's just a different level of loyalty that I then have to the organization and vice versa. So I think that's what you do. Like if you're like, how do I fix code switching? Create an environment where everyone can just be themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving us along, and as we get ready to, kind of wrap up episode 2, I want to talk about a couple of more things. Recently, we lost some civil rights icons. John Lewis being one who, is an elected official. And if you don't know who John Lewis is, I don't even know what to say about that. And then the other is C.T. Vivian. And I think for the Black community, as we take a step back and we really take a look at those pioneers that really made it possible for the 4 of us to be where we are, quite frankly. And they are dying off, it scares me. And I'm curious, how you all felt about that. And as you respond, think about the other part of that question is, how are you feeling about are you optimistic about the future related to this? Because like I said, these icons that carried the torch and they were on the front lines and they kind of charged forward and led the way. And there aren't that many of them left. And we haven't stepped up to kind of continue in that same vein. So, what were your feelings about that? And then also, how optimistic are you?
I'll start. I think I was pretty depressed when I heard about John Lewis. I was planning to kind of just chill out for that Friday night, and I got the alert that he had died, and I just went to sleep because I was so drained by it. And the next day, I thought about it some more, and I started watching back some of his speeches and reading some of his articles and quotes, and just reading more about him. I've always thought he was probably one of the bravest men around, period. You know what I mean? Just what he endured, what he knew he would endure, and he still went. And I know I couldn't have done that. And I know that I wouldn't be here, like you said, Shawn, if it wasn't for him. And what made me, I think, so sad about it was knowing where we are today. Mm-hmm. And I think on some hands, we're excited because people are listening now and we're able to have this kind of a dialogue publicly. And that's encouraging. But I do have the fear that this is going to end soon, or, what if this is going to be over and then people are tired of hearing about this and, we all get targets on our back. And I felt pain for Congressman Lewis because he worked so hard and he got us so far. And then knowing where we are now, not just since George Floyd and this awakening, but just in general, where we are in this last year or so, or a few years, how divided it feels and how negative it feels. And he had a president that constantly, disrespected him and what he stood for. And just, I wondered on his deathbed, what did he feel? Did he feel like he was leaving the world worse?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't think so, but did he feel like it could get worse? And so it really just pained me. And I'll just say, you know, the man fought so we can vote. If anybody decides not to go to the polls in November, just think about that man and think about where we wouldn't be and think about what he endured and just, if anything, do it for him.
Amen.
I think I'm struggling with words right now, and people will hear in a second. The cycle of the weekend, and he just kind of thinking about this now is a little bit of a trip. I was home Friday evening. I think I was watching TV. Harriet happened to be on, the story about Harriet Tubman. So it was on HBO. I happened to watch the last half of that, and I fell asleep on the couch after that. I then wake up to the news on Saturday morning of John Lewis passing away. And I'm typically pretty good about not checking my email or doing work on weekends most of the time. But for whatever reason, this was this morning I woke up, I checked my email. I think I was looking for something. And in all of the reactions we mentioned in the top of the show, not all was positive. One thing that did come from the show is there was a CNN op-ed piece. We can drop that link in now that I wrote, which expanded upon Shawn's point about like how can people do better in this moment. And so this Saturday morning, I woke up, checked my work email. I was looking for something, and the subject line said "F you," which, you know, I'm in journalism. We're the enemy of the people now. You know, this it's not that uncommon. But the body of the email actually said the N-word, and that was it. No period, just F you subject line, and then the N-word. And this is 2020. Mm-hmm. And I remember when I saw it, I just paused. I do have moments or experiences where that may have happened before. I think this is the first time it's been written per se directly at me. And this came from a person, like a real live email. My immediate reaction was to look this person up. I'm not even gonna give the person credit by giving them the limelight because their life is already a total mess. So there's nothing to cancel. But I remember I just kind of paused in that moment, and it was another one of those times where I just didn't even know what to feel. To me, it's like amazing where we're so far removed, quote unquote, from actual slavery. But seeing that email, like there was something there, and I still haven't processed like to what it is. But I just stopped. I paused in that moment, and of course I text y'all about it. Mm-hmm. And you know, you all gave your responses to it as well. But even right now in this moment, and I cannot bring myself to delete it, which is weird, right? Like I still can't bring myself to delete it. Like I just want proof that actually happened. It was here, and somebody sent that to me. So there's still like a lot to process with that there. And I think that's what people think about when they think about racism. Like this is this overt, I'm not that. So, you know, whatever, but you know, this still occurs. That happened to me recently, and I'm still kind of processing it. I haven't told a lot of people because I think the initial reaction is it's kind of overwhelming, where people want to comfort you and say, "I'm so sorry this happened," and so that is overwhelming as well too. But that happened.
But you think about the work of those civil rights icons. That's what they were fighting against, and yet here we are in 2020 in this environment.
Yeah.
And
I didn't
someone intentionally sent that to your work email. They had to look you up and find you, more than likely because they read that CNN op-ed and felt comfortable enough to send that email to you. And for me, I have to admit, you know, as much as I want to be optimistic, I'm skeptical because I think that, you know, there's going to be fatigue by white people and they don't want to deal with this anymore. And for Black people, we don't have the, you know, I'll use that word luxury. I can't turn off my Blackness. I got to live in this Black skin and I got to navigate this country. And the stuff that, you know, Irving mentioned, we're still dealing with it. So we need you in this game with us, and we need you to not get tired, because if you do, we're going to be right where we are and things aren't going to change. You know, it's something that it's going to take time for us to work together to bring about some change. But yeah, when you sent us that text, it pissed me off. Like, I was worked up that entire day. I was like ready to go full throttle and fight somebody, because I was just like so appalled that, you know, we had this wonderful first episode experience, and then the CNN op-ed, and while everybody doesn't have to agree with us, that's violence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For me, just CT Vivian and, you know, so many countless other people who we're losing, I equated it to how I feel when we lose our musical legends. You know, like we've lost a lot of musical greats, and I hear like these young kids, they hear a song and they're like, oh, this song is dope. And I'm like, you don't even know, like, this song is sampled from so-and-so. Like, you need to go listen to the original, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know the history. And so I feel like when we lose these, what I'm calling our ancestors, you know, the next generation, the younger generation, are just not understanding like what they went through, so that they can have certain freedoms and privileges, you know, in this country. And I'm going to address something really quickly about our people that I've seen, is these little slogans that say, I'm not my ancestors, or don't let your so-and-so get you messed up, I am not my ancestor. And I thought about that. I thought about that slogan too, in thinking about the recent deaths, because you're right, we are not, because we could never, like what they went through, we would not be able to endure today. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to, you know, I want to speak to that from a place of strength, and saying like, our ancestors were so strong. They did a lot for us. They fought blood, sweat, and tears, died for us to be able to be here today, to be able to have this conversation freely. You know what I mean? So we are not our ancestors. We could never, you know what I mean? We could never be that strong. And that's what I think about, is just how the next generation just they may not get to know that unless somebody's teaching them about these folks, you know what I mean? And I think we as a people have to do a better job of talking about our legends and how they've carried us through generations, to have the little bit of privilege we have right now in this country, and the rights that we have in this country, and, you know, garnering that respect for them, and understanding how much of a loss that is for our community, when these people leave the earth, you know, and the jobs that they've done for us. So that's immediately what I thought about. But I am optimistic, you know, because I think when I see the protests, the peaceful protests that are happening, and a lot of the movements, I see a lot of young people engaged in it, you know. And so for me, I feel like there's a relentlessness there with young people. You know, I don't think young people are going to get tired. I think they're going to keep pushing and trying to push us forward. But I need them to know their history too. Like, they aren't the first ones. Like, it's people been out here doing this. It's people that's been dying for this, you know, years and years before we've been out here marching the streets, you know. So I'm optimistic about where we'll be in the future.
And Shawn, I should say, even with my experience, I actually feel optimistic too, in the sense that, particularly in this moment, where one of the things that I think that is going to keep energy up is there's public accountability now that is on record across websites all over the world. So what I want to say is, how are Black Lives Matter in 2021? Can you follow up with me on how that went from 2020? And I think we haven't seen that kind of momentum before.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, like, from your perspective, obviously you're not as optimistic, but what is your take with all of it?
I think that, you know, it's about people honoring these commitments. You know, if they really want to help make things better or change the current tenor in the country, make the commitment. And I want to believe that the commitment is there. But like I said in episode 1, I need to see it. I need to see the action, because talking about it and posting about it on social media channels, that's nice, but get in the game and show me some action.
Know who's been showing us some action?
Go for it.
Seth Khan, for sure. Yeah, we certainly want to give a shout out to Seth, who's been really promoting our show and, you know, really kind of talking up the importance of the content that we're putting out to his network, which he has a vast network of executives, both nonprofit and for-profit. So thank you, Seth, so much.
I think what it's not what he's doing is a step further.
Yes.
He's got like a commitment to talk to 100 CEOs in like a week or something crazy. And he's having conversations and he's asking questions about race and asking them how they're dealing with social justice. And he has such a wide array of responses. He's got some people that are all for it. He's got other people that are like, it don't really affect me. It doesn't affect my board. It's that social justice has nothing to do with us. He's got others that are confused and don't know what to do. And I just love that he's asking the question and he's making people think about it, but he's not just stopping there. He's challenging people that don't want to do it to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think we need more of that. So I haven't even met Seth. I think we're going to chat soon, but I'm really thankful for him using, you know, his network, his privilege to get that word out for us and make this that much better for other people that look like us.
Yep. It's 100 CEOs in 100 days, which is a lot. I mean, that's a big commitment to kind of get to that goal. All right. Final words. What's on your mind? What are you thinking before we wrap up episode 2?
With the debug.
No.
You know, I like your background, Donté.
What'd you say, Michelle?
I like your background.
Thank you. I had to pull it together.
You all kicked it up. Yeah. I don't know.
I'll start.
Okay, please. I don't even have nothing.
I don't know how profound this will be. I think what do I know? I know this is a moment when a lot of people are having a lot of questions, and there's a fear to answer the questions in a wrong way. And I think people just need to push through the fear.
I think for me, what I know is that we are in a challenging time right now. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of pressures on all of us, no matter what race we are, you know. And I know that the best way to get on the other side of this is to go through it. As Irving said, you know, there's a lot of hard things we have to come to grips with and deal with, both, you know, within ourselves and collectively as a country. But I know we'll get to the other side of it and we'll be better for it.
And for me, it's just start where you are, do something, but just start. And you know, we can't sit back on the sidelines and continue to watch what's happening without getting in that game and being an active participant. So just start somewhere, do something. It may not be perfect, it may not be right, but just do something.
I think what I know is that I will continue to be that safe space for people when they want to talk through it, they want to work through it, they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. As exhausting as it is, I feel like we need some Team Michelles to do that. And I'll keep that responsibility until I get tired, and I'll switch to Team Shawn on that day.
Actually, can we put a little qualifier? I think you mean that figuratively, right? Because, you know, we have had a lot of people email.
Team Shawn, or emailing me.
No, I mean being there for people, being a listening ear. I think you mean in your network, right? Like, I think you're saying for people to find a Team Michelle in there.
Yeah.
You know, I had ambitions that I could have these conversations, but then I didn't know we were gonna have this many people reach out and want to talk. And I got 3-year-olds, so that don't always work out in the job. But if I know you and we're in the same network, and if we ever have an interaction, if I don't know you and we have a chance to talk, you know, feel free to do that. Feel free to hit me on LinkedIn. I'm on there now, and send me those messages and we can talk about it there. But then if not, find a Team Michelle. A Team Michelle.
And Michelle, I'm going to give you the last word here and tee up what our next episode is going to be about, because we're going to have some different co-hosts coming to the table for everybody to experience. I think it's going to be fabulous, but I'll let you tee that up and then we can wrap up.
So next episode, next month, date is not set, but it's going to be ladies' night. So we're kicking the guys to the curb. They're a little excited, I think, because they ain't got to be on here with me, but they're going to slide, and we're going to bring in some other amazing Black women leaders, definitely still in the association space, to just talk through racism, leadership, and what this journey is like as a Black woman. Because I think it's a different perspective, and there's some dynamic, powerful Black women out there, hashtag Black Girl Magic, and it's going to be ladies' night. So ladies, let us know what you want to talk about, what you want us to discuss. We're going to put some issues on the table. We're also going to put some issues on the table about how come I don't have a lot of those Black CEOs that I talk to. What's that about? It's probably me, but what's that about? You know what I mean? So we're gonna talk about that, because I know I'm not alone there.
Nope.
But I can't wait for the ladies' night. And
awesome.
So we're gonna switch to Prosecco.
Hey, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for the honesty, and that's a wrap for episode 2.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.